Hello. Today's chapter is the best Christmas present in the world. It is written by Michael Mopugo. It is a story about war between Germans and British. The story is divided into three parts. In the first part, the author finds the letter. It was written by Jim to Connie. In the second part, he reads the letter. Here, we get to know the wonderful thing that had happened in the battlefield. In the third part, he goes to return the letter to the rightful person. Let's start with the first part. The author buys a roll-top desk. He spots it in a junk shop in Bridport. He was planning of buying it from a very long time but was unable to afford it. The desk was in a poor condition, one leg was clumsily mended. There were scorch marks all down one side. Fire and water might have been the reason of its damage. The author found a small tin in its drawer. There was a piece of note cello taped to it. The receiver might have attached it. The note read, Jim's last letter, received January 25, 1915, to be buried with me when the time comes. It was written in pencil. Out of curiosity, the author opened the box and found an envelope in it. It was addressed to Mrs. Jim McPherson, 12 Collar Beaches, Bridport, Dorset. It was written on December 26, 1914. In the second part, the author opens and starts reading the letter. It was addressed to Connie, the beloved of Jim McPherson. Jim was in the battlefield away from Connie. Something wonderful had happened there and Jim wanted to share it with Connie. The letter describes a Christmas morning. The soldiers were found exchanging Christmas wishes instead of fighting. They were making peace in the middle of the war. A Fritz officer approached Jim and introduced himself as a cello player from Dusseldorf and wished him Happy Christmas. Jim too introduced himself as a school teacher from Dorset, in the west of England. From the conversation we get to know that Thomas Hardy was Woolf's favorite writer. Far from the Madding Crowd was his favorite book. The soldiers also played football in the battlefield. They shared ideas that football and cricket must be played in order to resolve war, since no one dies in a football match. The soldiers wanted the war to end so that they could return home. After the match, they returned back to their places and started singing carols. The Fritz soldiers sang Still Nacht and Silent Night. Jim's army sang chorus of While Shepherds Watched. Both the armies longed for peace but was left with no option but to fight. The letter ends with an assurance that Jim will be returning soon to his beloved Connie.
In the third part, the author decides to return the letter to Connie. He goes to the written address but finds a burned shell. Mrs. Connie was moved to a nursing home, Burlington House on the Dorchester Road, on the other side of the town after her house was damaged by fire. The author found Mrs. Connie, who is now 101 years old. She was happy to get the letter back. Her happiness could be seen in her glowing eyes. She at once recognized the letter, but she mistook the author to be Jim and asked him to read the letter for her. The story ends here.
Let's discuss about the characters in the story. We have three major characters: Jim McPherson, Connie McPherson, and the author. Jim McPherson is a British soldier. He was a teacher before joining the army. He was involved in the war against Germany. We can conclude that he had expired in the war because he never returned to Connie. Next we have Connie McPherson, the wife of Jim McPherson. She loved Jim. At the end we find her growing old and weak. Then we have the author. He buys the desk, reads the letter and returns it back to the rightful person. He has a big role to play in the story. He helps in the movement of the story.
In the story we find the soldiers behaving in a way which is very unusual, like playing football and exchanging wishes in the battlefield. They are shown in a more humane way. They only long to return to their families and not war. Secondly, the returning of the letter turned out to be the best gift for Mrs. Connie. She was happy to get the letter back, and also the author, whom she mistook to be Jim. We find hope in the story. The soldiers were hoping for the war to end and return home. Connie too was hoping that her husband would return someday. From the story we get to know the devastating effects of war on people. Thank you for watching the video. Please support us by sharing the video. Subscribe for more such videos.